Did you ever participate in show and tell, maybe in kindergarten or elementary school? If you did, you remember that you brought something that was special to you and you got to share that with your classmates. For some reason, I dodged show and tell all through my school career. I never got to participate in show and tell. I don't know how that happened. But I bring that up because even with our youngest children, we recognize the value in getting to participate in learning. You think about show and tell, what's the point of that? Well, it allows other children to learn something outside their own experience, and it allows them to participate themselves and share something from their experience in that learning process. Now, what does that mean for us as teachers? Can you do show and tell in Sunday school? Well, maybe with certain ages, but I'm certainly talking about something more broadly than that. I'm talking about the value of getting students to participate in their learning process at all ages. We really never outgrow that desire to want to be involved in the learning process. I've heard it said that whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning. Now, think about that. When we have a traditional setup where one person is the expert pouring out information to all the listeners, how effective is that? I'm not saying that lecture can't be effective. Many of us, that's the format that we have because of the logistics of our church teaching ministry, and that's fine. But there are ways even in that format that we can involve participants in their learning. We have to, if we're going to get them engaged, invested in retaining information. So let's talk about what that may look like. Today, I want to talk about the value of connecting to people's prior experiences. Now, you may see that phrase used in certain education circles, and what that really means is that we find ways in our teaching to reach back to something that student has experienced personally that they can attach to the teaching material you were talking about. This can look like a number of things. It can be what I just demonstrated at the very start of this video. Did you ever participate in show and tell when you were a child? You're immediately recalling personal experiences that you've had. And I can set that up as a bridge then to this teaching material. Now I'm saying, do you remember how that felt? Let's think about how we can get others to feel that. I asked you to connect to a prior experience. That set me up to be able to talk about this new teaching material. I want to encourage you, think about as you move into your teaching segment, whether it's with children, whether it's with youth, whether it's with adults, think about ways we can connect to an experience that student has already had. And this is important, so as then we work over into some new material, or we challenge them to apply material. It's not just an abstract, pray more, do more, be more, but we're giving them something they've already experienced in their life in the natural, and we make a bridge to a spiritual concept we're asking them to grasp and apply. Jesus did this so often. He taught in parables so that he could take a natural principle and connect it to a spiritual, more abstract principle. This is slightly similar. We've talked in other videos about the value of telling stories, but here we're talking about asking questions that prompt our students of all ages to think to some personal experience they've had. So they've got this concrete something and they can now attach that. And that's going to be incredibly important with our children. That's why if you use curriculum from PPH, you see that at the beginning of every Bible lesson, we are giving you a prompt to connect to their prior experiences. If we're telling a story about Jesus walking on water, we're going to ask some kind of question that while they've probably not walked on water, we're going to ask something that those kids can recall from a past experience that helps them now make this bridge to this new teaching material. For our youth, we see, because so many of our youth classes, our youth ministries, we have all of these fear factors and games and all that. We understand we have to get the youth involved. We can't just lecture for 45 minutes, an hour on wonderful biblical information, but if it doesn't have some way that connects to them personally so they know, I need to care about this. This affects me in a certain way. We've got these games and we've got these activities that most of us do intuitively. Part of the reason why that works is because it's getting that student involved in that learning and showing them that this has personal value and that they can be involved in the learning. I'm simply asking, as we teach our youth, let's find ways to ask questions. Has anyone ever ... You give them a way to get connected in that learning process. And this is no less important for our adults. Many of us teach a large group of adults, and so while we maybe can't do what we can do in a kids class or a small youth class where we start by saying, hey, has anyone ever visit a really unique place and we're raising hands and sharing experiences. If we don't teach in small groups, maybe we don't have that luxury. But we can still ask questions like that rhetorically to let people think and give them a minute to think about some experience they've had. So now as we move them into Bible teaching, they already are personally invested. It may look like, as you've probably seen if you've gone to some kind of special event where a special speaker is interacting with the crowd, there will be times where they say, turn and tell your neighbor a story about when you, whatever the prompt is. That's because those speakers recognize when they're connecting with a large audience. It's very easy for people to become disengaged because they don't have to be. They're one of many in a crowd. They don't have to be invested and connected with that teacher. So if you teach in a large sanctuary or you have many people in a class where it's a little too big to do some personal interaction, maybe invest in some moments where, besides just those rhetorical questions, which are good, maybe there's a time you say, turn and tell your neighbor about a time that you, whatever that scenario is, that then you can bring the class back together and say, now you probably in that moment felt whatever emotion, fear, happiness, joy. That's a lot like the Bible characters in our lesson today. And there's our bridge into the teaching material. At the end of our lessons, this is also very important because we're never teaching the Bible in isolation. We always are teaching for application and transformation. That means we have to get that Bible story from all those years ago into that student's life and into their heart. And we're going to need to ask some questions, and we're going to need to connect to those prior experiences again, so that that student once again brings the word into their lives, into their time. So today I want to encourage you, connect to the prior experience of your students, whatever their age, ask questions, get them talking to their neighbor about incidents from their lives that you can bridge to the Bible. We know that the Bible is absolutely relevant today. But sometimes we have to help our students make those connections. It always involves getting them connected to something in their lives so they can make that parallel. God's going to help us as we teach His Word. Stay tuned for more teacher training videos from Pentecostal Publishing House.